6 in the morning, outside Nakuru, in the Rift Valley of Kenya. Two excavators sit at the edge of a road cut. One is a Caterpillar 336, dead since yesterday. Its final drive bled out into the red soil. The other is a SANY Chinese 8 months old, already swinging its first bucket of the day. The man who owns both walks the gap between them with a coffee going cold in his hand. The Caterpillar part ships from South Africa. 3 weeks, maybe 4. The penalty clause on his road contract runs $2,000 a day, so the dead machine is costing him $42,000 just to wait. He stops between the two of them and does not look at the yellow one. He says it to his foreman. Order another SANY. What he is part of, standing there in the dirt, is a shift that has already moved across Africa, Southeast Asia, and South America, machine by machine. The Chinese machine did not take that market on its own. Caterpillar handed it over, years ago, in a decision that actually looked correct on every spreadsheet it touched. For most of the last century, a hydraulic excavator on a serious job site was a Caterpillar, or it was nothing. The yellow machines moved the earth for the interstate system across the United States. They cut the terraces for the copper mines of Chile. They dug the foundations of the Gulf cities. Caterpillar's hold was never only about the machine. It was about the network behind it. A dealer in almost every country, holding parts before the customer knew he needed them. Technicians trained on Caterpillar iron and nothing else. A response time measured in hours when a fleet went down because a Caterpillar idle for a week was a contract lost. That network was the real product. The 336 was only the thing it sold. But infrastructure built around one way of selling is only as strong as that model's fit for the next customer. In the early 2000s, a new customer appeared. He was building roads in places the dealer network had barely reached, and he was counting every dollar before he spent it. The company was SANY out of Changsha in Hunan province. It started building concrete pumps in 1989 and did not sell a serious excavator until the 2000s. The SANY machine was not better than the Caterpillar on paper. It did not need to be. It ran a Japanese hydraulic system and a proven diesel engine. The same class of parts found inside the yellow machine, wrapped in a chassis that cost about a third less to buy, and the parts did not ship from another continent. SANY built regional depots and stocked the fast-moving components close to the work. Therefore, when a contractor in Kenya or Indonesia or Peru needed a machine he could afford today and keep running next week, Caterpillar had nothing on the price list that qualified. SANY did. So did XCMG, the older state-owned giant out of Suzhou, selling the same proposition under a different badge. Picture a yard outside Addis Ababa in 2014. A contractor runs 11 excavators, 9 of them yellow. One is down again, waiting on a swing motor that the dealer says will arrive when it arrives. He walks the line of his machines in the morning with a clipboard, counting the ones that can actually work today. The SANY dealer has offered him 3 new machines for what 2 Caterpillars would cost, with a technician who answers the phone on the first ring. He stops at the dead machine, puts his hand on the cold track, and stands there. The week before, that dealer had walked him through a parts room on the edge of the city, shelves stocked with swing motors and final drives and hydraulic pumps, every fast-moving part for his fleet, sitting under one roof an hour from the job. He had stood in that room a long time, saying nothing, doing the arithmetic in his head. The logic of his situation says one thing, and he says it to his foreman. I am not running a museum. I am running a contract. He signs for the SANY machines that week. But one contractor switching does not move a market. What moved the market was what happened in the 10 years after that signature. Here is the mechanism that explains why Caterpillar let that happen and why it would do it again. Selling machines is lumpy. A contractor buys a fleet, then buys almost nothing for years while those machines work. That shows up as a spike on the revenue chart, and then it vanishes. What Wall Street pays for is the opposite: smooth, recurring, high-margin income that arrives every quarter whether or not anyone buys a new machine. For Caterpillar, that income is parts and service. A single excavator can burn through more than its purchase price in parts across a working life, and every filter and final drive and hydraulic line comes back through the dealer at a margin the machine itself never earns. By the late 2010s, the company had said the plan out loud to its own investors. It set a target to grow services revenue to $28 billion, close to double where it had started. The first sale was the hook. The decades of parts behind it were the business. To protect that stream, the machine price has to stay high and the parts have to stay proprietary. Cutting the price to fight SANY in Kenya would have shaved the margin the whole model depends on. The executive who declined to build a cheap fighting excavator was not trying to lose Africa. He was trying to protect the recurring revenue that lifts the share price. Those are not the same goal. When they collide, the share price wins, margin was defended, the market was not. If this is the content that you find interesting, subscribe so the next one finds you. That helps us keep making videos like this. Now back to the story. One contractor's switch was invisible, but the Belt and Road financing that followed was not. Chinese state banks attached cheap loans to the infrastructure projects spreading across Africa, Southeast Asia, and Central Asia. And those loans came easiest when the equipment on site wore a Chinese badge. Therefore, the machine that was already 1/3 cheaper became cheaper still, paid for on terms no Caterpillar dealer could match. The yellow fleets stopped growing in the exact regions where construction was growing fastest. But cheap money only opens the door. What kept SANY and XCMG inside was that the machines held up well enough, and the parts kept arriving. Therefore, the contractor who took the first machine on price took the second on trust. But trust alone was not the end of it. SANY and XCMG began assembling machines inside the markets they were selling to. SANY opened an industrial park in South Africa. XCMG built assembly lines in Brazil and in Saudi Arabia. Therefore, the Chinese machine stopped being an import at all. It became local content, eligible for the government tenders and the local jobs rules that an imported machine could never satisfy. The reputation Caterpillar spent a century earning in North America was being built fresh by someone else, in the markets Caterpillar had treated as an afterthought. But every machine sold abroad fed the factory back home, and that factory was the thing Caterpillar should have feared most. The decision underneath all of it was not a relocation or a single bad quarter. It was a choice Caterpillar made on purpose and kept making. The company owned the answer the entire time. In 2008, it bought a Chinese maker of cheap machines and ran it as a value brand called SEM. It could have turned that brand loose on the world to fight SANY on price in every emerging market at once. It did not. Letting a budget Caterpillar compete in the open would have admitted that the premium price was a choice and not a law. And it would have pulled customers down off the machines that fed the parts annuity. Therefore, the value brand stayed boxed inside China, and the rest of the world was left to SANY and XCMG. By the time that looked like a mistake, the The Chinese makers had turned a decade of global volume into their own engineering. By the middle of the 2020s, XCMG and SANY both stood inside the top 4 construction equipment makers on Earth, third and fourth, behind only Caterpillar and Komatsu. The machine that began as the cheap option had closed most of the gap that justified the Caterpillar price. The moat was the network and the reputation. SANY had built its own, one underserved contractor at a time. With the money, Caterpillar decided it did not want to chase. None of this turns over fast. The yellow machines already on site will keep digging for years because a working excavator does not get replaced on a feeling. The fleets are real, and they are not vanishing tomorrow. But new orders are where the future is decided. And in Africa, Southeast Asia, and Latin America, the new orders are increasingly not American. Chinese machinery exports to Africa grew more than 50% in a single recent year. SANY now earns more than half its money outside China, at margins fatter than it makes at home. Caterpillar still builds the better excavator. It just decided 1 quarter at a time that the contractor who could not afford one was not worth keeping. The same logic is already running inside another American giant, in a different machine class, with a louder engine and a longer history. The wheel loader is next, and the company that owns it has even more parts revenue to protect.